Sorry I'm late. Welcome to my living room. My name is Lana Labonte. I am here to uplift, support, inspire, and hopefully that empowers you to be the best version you are meant to be and who you are meant to be. So, once again, I thought I had my camera set up properly. There's a lot to talk about. How do you identify yourself? Think about that. How did you come up with this description, identity? And actually, a lot of people don't know how to describe themselves. They really don't know who they are. They only know what they do. Or maybe they can describe themselves, but they don't really know the depth of their being, their human, or their soul, or their heart, or, fragments. And when we see through a broken lens, because we've been pulled in all these different directions, we tend to see the fragmentation on whatever it is. We project where we're at. If we are fragmented, we're not in our wholeness, we can't see the full story. We can't understand or understand what is really going on along around us. There I am. Yay. Hey, Shakti. So today I'm talking, and this is actually coming up because James and I were having a conversation around the id and the ID. We were talking about identification and this constant need to prove our human, to provide documentation, to prove we're blood, that we're alive. How crazy is that, right? Hi that way. It's insulting, actually. And at what point did we start even doing that or allowing that? This goes back to the indoctrination. This goes back to how we've been influenced by the power of suggestion. And I've talked about this before regarding how from the moment you're born, you're basically trained into a system. You're told how you should behave. And like I talked about in my last video regarding, as children, we didn't want to be told what to do because we were so in our nature and our curiosity. We wanted to follow like our instinct, which is the id. The id is that primitive, psychic, it's fundamental to our desires, our drives, our wants, wishes. It's actually, that's the more animalistic aspect within us, the unconscious pleasure principle. Whereas you would think it's the ego. The ego is technically supposed to be the mediator when you break it down to the id, the ego, and the superego. The superego is more aligned with the, morality. Ego is with reality. And then you've got the id that's in the pleasure principle. It's always seeking to be satiated, to meet your needs. And there's a whole list of your basic needs that it will try to satisfy. And one of the things, as I was researching, because I had to remind myself about the nature of the id, the superego, and the ego, was that the id is also, and can be, can manifest addiction, which makes sense when you really stop and think about it. And there's no coincidence that our ID is also in reflection, duplicity of the word id. Identity comes from all of that. But none of that is your identity. And they play and they pray. We'll go back to this way that we're conditioned, this way that we are trained and entranced into going along to get along, because that's just what we've always done. And our parents are just teaching us what they were taught. Yeah, the fake scenes and false idols, keeping us ignorant of reality in distraction, the Wizard of Oz syndrome. So our parents were doing the best they could. They're only going based on what they knew and what they learned throughout their lives. We're here to improve upon each subsequent generation. We are the longest living survivors of our ancestors. I think we're doing pretty damn well if you think about it. That's like in itself, like, wow, I'm grateful. I'm grateful I could bring it this far. And so we're conditioned to believe and accept blind faith all accepted in this whole like, what? And see, children will ask questions. I know when I was a child, why? Why do we do this? And the parents get annoyed because they don't actually have the answers. So instead of being honest with the answers, many of us would ask those questions like, but why? But why? And the answer would be, it's just that way. Don't question it. Or do as I say, just because I said so. You know, these old systemal, like the patriarchy of authoritarianism, and you're supposed to do what I say because I said it, not because there's a reason for it. That's actually backwards. That doesn't serve and it doesn't nurture. If anything, that's all about the enslavement that humanity has been placed under a spell right now. This is where we're at. And this is why you're feeling the rumblings of like, what the hell is going on here? Like this past month was deep reflection for a lot of people. And I know it took you out energetically, like, oh, this is exhausting. Where did the week go? What the heck just happened? Right? And all the world's a stage. There's always something to inundate you and overstimulate you of all of this information. We have access to more information now than we ever did before. Do we need to know it all? No, we don't. This whole FOMO, fear of missing out, I need to be in the know. I got to know what's going on with people that don't even mean anything to you. This is the false reality. This is the fake scene with these false idols that people are worshiping and defending. They think they're real. They actually go out on a limb. Didn't y'all learn this game 3 years ago? Yeah, right? Hi, Pamela. Like, didn't you learn the lesson 3 years ago? How they hook, line, and sink you into the following, and then it turned into, oh, that was an incredible source. They Jedi mind tricked me into complying or denying or fighting and resisting. Like, divide and conquer is the oldest trick in the book. They've been doing it for centuries, for eons. They've done it, speaking of the Roman Empire, right? All it is the same script played out over and over again. They are so predictable. But here we go again. And we've all been here before. And people are continuing to play into it, continuing to buy into the lies. When are we going to wake up to this crap? It's like, are you kidding me? We're still doing this. We're still allowing them to dangle the carrot, to promise all these goodies. That's what they did in the Roman Empire. They promised and kept them drunk and happy, full bellies, you know? What is that old saying? Hard times make for strong men. Easy times make for weak men. Like, we're in those stages again. We've been here before with this. Let's look at history. What we kind of know about it, or, you know, what is somewhat discernible and distinct, because the victors always win and write the stories. And there's so much, if you go back through history, regarding what they used to call book thieves, where they would take books and they would blank out what the original text was because there was a certain solvent they could use, but it didn't get rid of it entirely. And then they'd write other stories into those books, and that they would actually do it for certain people. Oh, thank you, darling. I appreciate you. They would write victors into the storyline. Was it true stories? From my understanding, there's a lot of stuff that wasn't true, that wasn't maintained. A lot of lies. Because isn't this, and I just saw a quote earlier today. Who wrote it? The quote was regarding history being unpredictable, but the future being predictable. It was actually like the flip-flop. The reality is that this is what's happening, especially with this digital world, where things can disappear in an instinct, or can be manipulated, modified, photoshopped, edited. Like the whole Minority Report comes to mind. Some crazy shit going on right now. So it's really easy, because from the moment you're born, you've got this id, and they prey upon that. And I really believe that's where the harvesting of energy is actually coming from. That deep instinctual nature has been formed over the course of your formative years. You've been informed, you've been influenced, infiltrated. It's filling you in. It's actually giving you the data instead of allowing you to feel out and intuitively know your nature. As many of you who are older now and you recognize over the course of your life the inconsistencies, the things that don't make sense, that you question yourself. I'm almost 50 and it's like I look at my life and go, wow, I feel like I got the wool pulled over my eyes so many times. And it's like, are you kidding me? Really? And I tolerated it. I put up with it. I went through it. Like, I tell people some of my life stories and they're like, holy crap, really? You went through that? I'm like, just the other day I was sharing with a woman something and she goes, just listening to my story, she goes, I feel like I'm watching a movie right now because of the way I was explaining the situation. And so these many lives that we have, especially if you've lived as many lives as I have in this one life, you start to recognize there's an inconsistency in patterns, and you start to begin to see the real patterns and see through the facade and understand and understand what is true and what is fiction. Or like the fact that I got so many notes as to the past week that I almost feel like I might need to break this up because it's a lot. So remember, the id, your ID, your identity, is the unconscious pleasure principle seeker. It's our original unconscious personality. It's your nature, whether animalistic or human. I don't think animals can't necessarily choose and decide the way humans can know morality, let's say. That's what the superego is for, is the morality. But seeing through the facade is also acknowledging that something ain't right. And this all goes back to personal responsibility and accountability. But see, what happened is, in the beginning, you were birthed. And as you were being born, even when you were in the womb, you were being influenced from the external. So you were taking in all this sensory information. You were taking in the emotions of your parents and what they were going through. Like, you took on all sorts of stuff. It's like, woo, can you imagine? Especially because you're in the fluid of the mother. I mean, you receive more sensory stimulation in those watery environments. Like, the sound that travels is crazy, right? This is my interpretation and sense of it, that we have systems in place that we've never questioned. And that the identity, your ID as a piece of paper, is not who you are. So who are you? You are a living, breathing human, having, a soul having a human experience. You are not your emotions. You are not the color of your skin. You are not your gender. You are not your name. You are not what you do. There is no descriptor for you being. In fact, the minute you label something, you limit it. You have actually tarnished the being. Anytime we label something, we have essentially put it in a box and dismissed it. It loses its appreciation, its gratitude, the true splendor and sparkle that it has. But we are living in this reality where there's a lot of labels. We feel the need to describe, to come up with answers, to speak about something, it's this. And I know this for myself. When I was younger, sometimes you don't even know when to shut up or be quiet, because sometimes you feel you haven't gotten enough attention. So sometimes you're in that space. I'm saying sometimes. In my past, I recall what it felt like to need someone to hear me, to see me, to witness me, to teach me to see me, to hear me, to witness me. Because that's what we do when we're young. We're navigating the waters of this world, of our path, riding the waves of emotions, trying to make sense of who we are. That's what the child does, is like experiential. And as I expressed in my last video, when we start talking about what it was like as a child, You wanted to just start, keep playing, but your parents were like, listen, we got to do some other things. And so you were forced to follow their lead. And there were probably many times when they made you mad because you wanted to continue doing what you were doing. Or they told you not to do something that you loved doing. Or they wanted you to do something you didn't want to do. And it was, I can't wait till I become an adult so I can make my own choices. And then you became an adult, and all of a sudden you got a government entity, fictional character too, by the way, doesn't exist in human form, it's just on paper, telling you what you should or shouldn't do, trying to be the authoritarian over you, trying to dictate your life, claiming it's in your best interest, but yet you are the governing body. You and I are the governing bodies for the people, by the people. And it's ironic to see the way that the world is playing into this game, the fictional character game, the fake scenes and false idols, everything on paper. When did this start? Birth certificates? Fake documentation, lost at sea. You are a dead corpse on paper. That is the entity. That is not you. That is the fictional character they created in your image, let's say. They literally took your footprint, your soul, on your birth certificate. And because we weren't trained or taught or explained our rights, how we were to reclaim our sovereignties and securities at the age of 18, and we had up until the age of 21 or 25, because we weren't, it was withheld. See, it was withheld from us. Or even if it was exposed to us, it was done in such a subtle way, we didn't recognize it. And that goes back to the old school systems of the old schoolhouses before the government got involved. They used to teach these things. As soon as the government got involved, it was an opportunity for them to teach us what they wanted us to know versus what we needed to know. How many of y'all have gone through school and gone, at the end, you're like, why did I even have to take statistics or social studies or this or that, whatever classes, when it didn't actually, we're sold on the stock market, which is also how they sell cattle and chattel. Hello. We are basically a commodity. And so in these school systems, all this useless information that they have taught us, because, Rockefeller wanted a society of workers, not thinkers. And so when you start looking over and recognizing the incongruencies, the inconsistencies, the disparities, the untruths, the withholding of your rights, your liberties, and everybody's still convinced that voting works, that voting even counts. Can we just say if voting worked, it wouldn't be legal? Yeah. And so when you start looking into this, and I'm that person who says, I'd rather know the truth than have to be exhausted by the lie, because lies are exhausting, and trying to keep up or live a lie sucks the life force energy out of you. That's why so many people age quicker than their actual birth. And again, we're going to go back to identity and the id, the ID. They need you to comply to their paper trail game, which is the biggest lie ever told. I know, I'm exactly. Clearwater's right up the street. Scientology's right up the street from me. So all of these cults of personalities, they need you to play their paper game, because what they've created is a fictional character on fictional entity, parasite, we could call it even, on paper. When someone asks you for your ID, which is technically insulting because it's like, I have to prove that I'm standing in front of you. They're trying to say that it's for your safety, to protect you. But in reality, it's a track and trace system. That's the original track and trace system right there. That they knew our IDs weren't there to protect us. It was their way to track and trace us. How insane is that? So everybody's talking about the mark of the beast, but it's always started out that they've been flipping the switch, and it's our complacentness that has supported it as well. We've done this to ourselves, and it's been repeated over and over in history. Same script, They change their names. They change their identities. They protect their identities. They protect themselves in such a way that you know who they are because you're not allowed to talk about them. Because then they'll use certain terminology that implies that you're slandering rather than just calling out the corruption that it is. When you know you cannot speak against a certain group, that's when you know who is really running the show and the puppet masters. But there's even layers to that as well. Do we even come close to seeing who is really behind it all? I don't think so. I don't think the name has been put. It makes me think of the never-ending story, you know? That which will not be named, nothing. So this is a clever paper trail game. None of it exists. It's a story. It's a fictional story. We're fictional characters, and we're going along and playing along to their game. The only way this changes is if people wake up and realize you've been played. You know, when you go into government offices and buildings, everybody's working on the survival mode. I have to pay my bills, never questioning why you even have to pay bills. Why are you even have to pay to live on this planet? Why do you have to provide identification for who you are, right? And you have to know the legalese. You have to know your rights and how they've utilized the terminology against us. And all it takes is they can trip you up because they know it all. They're the ones operating unlawfully, though. But if we don't call it out, they just continue to get away with it. And fear is what holds people back, because when you do not take personal responsibility and accountability, you are fearful of others taking control over you because you don't understand your power. Your power lies in the courage to stand up and say, I know who I am. I am not that piece of paper. I withdraw myself from this situation because I was influenced without, what's the word? It's informed consent, inform. But we've flipped it even on ourselves sometimes. We just keep on going, well, I'm afraid that if I don't pay my taxes or I don't do this, they're going to put me, are they going to put you in jail? They're not. There's a lot of things that legally, if you know what you're doing, what is the BCCRSS is the escape clause. Oh, you're going to have to send me whatever that is. I want to know more because I have a lot of theories on a lot of things. But the only way we're going to really get out of this mess is if more people start recognizing it's not us against us. They're over there laughing at us, saying, see, we got away with it again. See how stupid these people are? And they think we're meant to serve them, that they're the chosen ones. So all we are fodder, enslaved into their system. And the assumption that we have any freedom, anytime you go to ask for permission for anything in your life, that is not freedom. You technically, legally don't need ID. You just followed suit into the program. And that was complicit complacency and ignorance too, because we didn't know. What you don't know can harm you. It will put you in this cycle, this loop, this never-ending hamster wheel of trying to prove yourself. Because in that in itself, you're not here to prove yourself to anyone. The ID thing is showing you that you are trying to prove yourself. See, here's my ID. I'm afraid you're not going to believe me. You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You don't need their validation. But that's what they play on, is that insecurity. See, it's about claiming your securities. You see how the play on the words is regarding the maritime admiralty law? Like the whole dead at sea, lost at sea, that they're running our trusts based on our paperwork. So essentially what's happening is they are taking advantage of the fact that we're insecure. They took our securities, and that's why we're insecure, and we have insecurities. Isn't that clever? You see how clever the languaging is? That the securities are your your monies, your trust, what's your life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's why most people are insecure, because they haven't claimed their securities. They don't understand their power. They haven't been able to step into it. You know how you step into it? You start doing the research. You start learning the languaging. You first, actually, even before you do that, you might have to do some shadow work to recognize you are not broken and you don't need to be fixed, and that you're just fragmented, and what you don't express what you suppress will express until you address it. The only reason you're insecure is because of the different things that have happened in your past that have made you question your worth, your value, that you don't know yourself. When you don't know yourself, it makes it easier for them to form you into, mold you into their image. Think about that. God made man in his image, but man is trying to put and make God his image. That's this fucked up game they're playing. And everything being on paper, which we need to burn. And this is one thing that James said to me earlier when we were conversing. He said, the tree of life. Paper sliced up. Fragmented is what I added to it. It's like they took the tree of life and they sliced it up and put us all on pieces of paper, and that our true nature goes back to the root. You know, trees are the breath of life. That's what gives us oxygen, because of the carbon. Hello, when they say carbon footprint, that is what makes oxygen. Duh. Well, they think we're ignorant. They truly think we're stupid. At what point are we going to turn around and wake up and go, hello, you really thought we were that stupid? I mean, if I didn't learn already the game of this whole, sustainability thing. I mean, I've been in computers all my life, and I've gone through computers after computers after computers and devices and this, that, and the other. Has anybody seen the sustainability on that one? For the amount of money you spend, for the resources they mine. We're still on electric that is serviced by coal and oil and maybe some wind turbines and all, but its majority is coal and oil, maybe nuclear. But the ultimate ruse and like, oh, we're going to do this Pollyanna approach. Oh, we need to save the environment. They don't fucking give a shit about us. They want to use their philanthropy to make money on us. The carbon they want to extinct is you and me, not the planet. Because they're still mining and stealing resources from other countries. They're always looking for oil. Oil is renewable. It's the second most renewable source in the planet. Oil and water below the surface of the crust. And it's not a fossil fuel either. Most geologists have come out and said this already. But, when you go behind closed doors and you decide to, I got a great idea. If we say it's non-renewable, then we can make more money. The supply and demand, the greatest businessman tactic, the materialism, the marketers, the bankers, hoarding their stash like pigs, oink, oink. What was that book? George Orwell. So this is the part that gets me the most. You go into a government building, you've got somebody who's working behind the desk. And actually, let's go back to when there used to be a time your social security number was supposed to be safeguarded and you weren't supposed to give that out to just anybody. Now people are just rattling it off like it's nothing to anyone who asks for it, never questioning it. Even though on it says, do not use as identification. And then it's the stupidity of the games that they play is, well, we need two forms of identification. We need to make a copy of your social security card, which is not supposed to be photocopied. But in order to get the driver's license or any other documentation, they probably needed, and most likely needed, your social security number. Can't make sense out of nonsense. It's distraction and it's busy work. It's like when I was in the military. Hurry up and wait. They would tell you to go to an appointment 15 minutes before the appointment, but sometimes somebody else would add 15 minutes and you'd end up at the appointment a half an hour early. I don't know about anybody else, but I hate sitting around waiting and doing nothing. That's one of the reasons I'm constantly on the go, is I'm doing one thing to the next, and I like to have it in a flow. I don't like to sit idle on someone else's watch when I could be doing something. That's like wasting my time, and I find it ignorant and insulting to tell me that they don't trust me enough to show up to an appointment, that they feel the need to tell me to go to the appointment not once, but twice, 15 minutes earlier. But that was something I witnessed over my military career, and I just was shaking my head going, this is so absurd. It's all a game. And I saw that on the inside too, and that when leadership is toxic, it's going to trickle down. And it affects the people on the bottom more than anything. And then people wonder why they're so miserable in their jobs. And they're angry. And so it causes that distrust among us. The distrust among us is how they get at us. That's how they break us up and break our unity. By pitting us against each other using racism, using cultural wars. All of this is made up stories. That's not who we are. We're being played like a chess game. Literally, they are using us as their pawns. It's the biggest Ponzi scheme. You ever think about that one? Pawns, Ponzi. Oh, those two words go perfectly together, don't they? The Ponzi scheme, we're the pawns, and we've been taken advantage of so easily because people are in fear. They're afraid of authoritarianism, of their powers that be. But no, they're not. You're afraid of something that is supposed to be taking care of you. No, that's where we have to step back up and say, you work for me. And if you can't do your job, you need to step down. You're fired. People forget we can do that. You know, there was a time of tar and feather too. We used to also hold them accountable in a way that would enforce, you know, by example, because they're sure as heck doing it to us. What do? They put someone out there in the world stage to punish, to keep the rest of us in line. You think that's a new tactic? We don't even know how many times that's been done and that it was even a real situation. That it wasn't just a dog and pony show, that it's just the world stage. Again, entertaining and entrancing us, just like in the Roman Colosseum. Keep them entertained, and they'll never see what we're doing behind the curtain. That's the Wizard of Oz, constantly at play. That they need you to identify, to have an ID that they can prey upon and program into you using the media, using advertising, making you addicted to all of these vices, all of these desires, drinking, drugs, sex, you know, all of this stuff is designed to keep you weak. Because if they can get you through your animal instincts, that's like the easiest way to control people. Here, we'll give you nice, bright, shiny objects, promising all sorts of stuff, until they don't deliver, and then you're like biting at the bit, or they give you a little nugget. Here's a taste. Or hanging and dangling the carrot to just keep you along, where you've got the blinders on like a donkey's ass, right? And all you see is the carrot, but you don't see over here the slaughtering that's going on. You don't see that you're about to go through the guillotine yourself. So this whole deception around, and I want to say deception, but it's actually influence, because they don't force us to do anything. That's the funny part. They get us to do the dirty work, because as James says, the hidden hand doesn't like to get its own hand dirty. So it manipulates through the influence, through the stories that it tells. But see, rarely does the average human call their bluff. Very rarely. Because they're afraid they'll be set as an example and punished. And if that happens, then what, right? What's the worst that could truly happen? I mean, yeah, we can talk about life and death, but a lot of times it ends up being that if you stand up for yourself, but see, this is why safety in numbers, this is why it's so important that more people come together. Because if you don't have support, that they want you distrusting among us, right? I said, they want the distrust among us so that we don't trust one another, and they've got us hook, line, and sinker. Because the more we're against each other, the easier it is for them to get away with what they've been getting away with. You know, Big Brother's going to watch over you. It's going to take care of you. Yep. See how that's going. They don't care about us. Even in the previous world wars, I don't know if you know this, but they brought in immigrants and promised them all sorts of special gifts if they fought in the war so they didn't have to get their hands dirty, because they didn't have enough people to go along to participate in the war. So they brought in people from India and Africa and other nations. The Germans had more foreign soldiers than they had Germans. So figure out what that means and just look at the world stage right now and connect those dots. Because years ago when I used to live in Italy, there were a lot of immigrants that were coming in, and you see what's happened in the UK, you see what's happening in Paris and France. These people are brought in to create the chaos deliberately. And when I lived in Italy, what they would do is they would bring in immigrants to be gypsies, to sell stuff on the street. I knew a few people that were brought in, and my heart like really ached and hurt, because they pimped them off, males, boys, men, women, children, like in the bars and around the neighborhood. Like it just broke my heart. It made me so sad. They'd be selling things, and then you don't know what else they were selling. That was the only way they could get by, because they were indentured servants. They were promised all this stuff to come over to this other country, and then they withheld their own passports. So what ends up happening is a lot of times these promises in these new lands turn into slavery, modern day slavery. And that's been happening for a very long time in Europe. And look at now what they're doing. They're trying to play the same game over here, because who's going to actually fight against us on our soil? It wouldn't be us against us. It's the you know who, as James said earlier on one of his videos, and what we've been talking about. You can take those letters and figure out who I'm talking about. There's been speculation who owns New York City is not the Americas. It's not United States. It's the letter U and the letter N. And you know who is trying to infiltrate, to fill in rations, like really get in here, because if America falls, and it's not going to happen. I don't feel that's going to happen personally, but that's the end game. That's the goal. And the fact that they were even talking about, who was it? I saw the Pope and somebody else were talking earlier about we need to, Bill Clinton. They were talking about how we need to decrease the population. And I'm over here going, and you people still idolize these idiots? They don't care about us. As far as they're concerned, we're too many people to control. They need to reduce the population so they can have a better grip on us. That's what that's about. There's no climate change. There's climate manipulation. There's shit being sprayed all over you all the time. Your water is poisoned. Your food is getting poisoned left and right. They have to wear hazmat suits so they can spray the poisons on the foods that they sell to us in the grocery stores. Tell me that's not disgusting, that you have to learn to source your food anymore because the regulatory agents are there to not regulate the food, but do whatever they can to the food to regulate us. It's usury. All of it is. And again, what blows my mind are the people who get paid in these positions that can't see how they're part of the problem. So when you're asked for your ID, who's asking for the ID? They'll say, like, for example, you'd be taken to court for something, right? Or maybe you get a speeding ticket. The state or the city or whatever against you. Do you know that's not a living entity? Yeah, exactly. They don't care about us. The state, the city, these entities are fictional institutions, fictional characters on a piece of paper, as are you when you use your ID. There is no grief. There is no injustice that needs to happen. That is actually part of their revenue building. That is illegal, to try to coerce you, to influence you, to deceive you the way they do by trying to bring you to court so that they can profit, because they get money from the bar association. The bar is actually out of London, first off, so they're operating in international waters, as they'd say, because it is maritime admiralty law, and they're out of their jurisdiction. And if you ever ask them who their loyalty is to, it's not to you, it's not to the state, it's to the bar. So they're making money off of you from your bond, your trust. There's a whole cycle of information that you can go down that rabbit hole and recognize that in essence, they owe you money. And you don't have to comply. You do not have to submit. You just have to know how to proceed or not proceed. Asking someone for ID is called aiding and abetting. Aiding and abetting is against the law and is a prosecutable offense. Exactly. Exactly. I forgot about that. So thank you for that reminder that this is the direction we all need to come together and help one another in going. We need to return to the sovereignty of our being, our human. We're not citizens. We're not, we don't belong to these entities. And believe it or not, that since they don't exist, why are we still answering to them? When someone asks you for your ID, it's basically saying that they're playing the paper game. It's a paper trail, again, to track and trace you. So they can make money off of you. They can trade you. They can gamble with you. That's essentially what they're doing. They can feed off of you, literally on the energy side as well. So it's not just money. It is actual energy harvesting. Yeah. Do this will be on my community, right? But in truth, we really need to remember, which is to come together, bring our parts, the pieces, our energy back together in community to work together. Because if we don't start doing this, I mean, we're way beyond, we're behind on schedule as far as getting together and actually coming up with a solution. The solution is no longer submitting to this bullshit, this game that they've been playing. Okay, our parents didn't know this happened. I think the wars are what usually trip people up, because they start to get in that fear department and they think what they're seeing is what is really truth. But all of the world's a stage, and all of these wars, I mean, now that we've got this overwhelm of information, the data, the information age of computers and digital and most of which can be created and like I said, can be manipulated, edited, holograms, movie propaganda. Like even back in the days of the wars, they were using cardboard tanks. They had propaganda agencies. They were pushing all sorts of stuff that were not truths, but full lies. They were pushing one narrative, and things are coming out now where people are going, what? What? It was never about us. Yeah. They are responsible though. And so are we. We need to be accountable and responsible for ourselves and one another. They have literally dumbed people down deliberately to keep them under their spell, under their thumb, Give them a bone, see what they does with it, and let them fight amongst themselves for one bone. That kind of deal. Like treating us like rabid animals that can't take care of ourselves. Treating us like children that need to be, coddled or like punished or penalized for not doing what we're supposed to do. Like, really? Do you really enjoy that kind of living? I mean, you can live with blinders on, but it's exhausting. And that at a certain point, even your body kicks in and says, dis-ease, this does not align. This is not who I am. The truth will always come out, because a lie is so challenging. It's difficult for someone to continue to live a lie, but also to keep the lie up. If you listen long enough, you will catch the inconsistencies. You will catch the drips, the mess ups, they'll tell on themselves. People who lie will tell on themselves. They think their shit doesn't show. Again, we're a bunch of monkeys throwing our shit at one another and not realizing that our shit shows. Yeah. We were lied to about everything. So true. We really were. I mean, And even James and I were talking about the whole, ancestry and 23andMe and all of these ways of tracing back your roots to your family, because we humans are seeking answers, right? And on an unconscious level, we want to know how far back our history goes. We want to see, where does it originate? So it's natural for us to want to find out information. But how much of that stuff's true? I mean, most of the stuff, the information was lost, destroyed. Some of it wasn't even complete or even factual. And so people will cross their stuff and it doesn't necessarily line up. So you really don't even know where it goes back to. But it is a natural urge for us to seek answers and to find out, what is the meaning of my life? And so I like that, from the higher, not for hire. That's clever wording. I like that. But the whole tracing our history, our lineage, our ancestors, our families, as we're seeking meaning. We also want to know, where did we come from? How did we start? Where did we originate? Has it been thousands of years? I don't know. I don't even know when I hear these things like, oh, they found such and such was 100 and these obnoxious numbers, I don't know where the heck they come up with them. Just like I have this really hard time with a lot of history, where Napoleon and all them, they just traveled all over the place with horses, and in this period of time, I'm like, man, they covered some ground, didn't they? Did they really? Or how 6 million people were gassed in the Holocaust, but only what was it 250,000 that the Red Cross actually acknowledged of happening? I mean, I don't know what to believe. I think it's all a ruse. I think it's all a lie. Why? Because we blindly listen to what we're told. So when you hear somebody say, well, how do you know that's not true? Where's your facts? Where's your information? I'm over here going, and you believe everything you're told? Because that's where we have the biggest issue, and that's why people fight amongst themselves. Because you've got I want to believe what I'm told, and because you've believed it for so long, you'll keep on defending it, because that's your BS, right? Your BS is your belief system. Everybody has one, and it's the biggest addiction we have in this human existence, is believing that we're right, is thinking, the ego wants to be right versus happy. So it will go to war to defend the lie, or, because you've known it for so long, it doesn't matter if it's a lie. You've believed it so long, you have accepted it, and you've never questioned it. And this is where we all fall short. If we don't question things, how will things ever change? How do we evolve and grow if we don't have conversations? Yeah, the hard ones. Ugh. It sucks. You don't want to know, but eventually it's going to come out. And usually when it comes out, when you're not willing to face it, it hurts even more. It stings, it burns. It's like, whew, I can't handle this. I don't have the capacity to deal with this right now. Tough shit. There's a certain point, even the universe says, wake the fuck up. We ain't playing anymore. We kept giving you the information. We gave you clues. You didn't want to listen. You kept trying to suppress it. And why do you think it keeps expressing? It keeps expressing because you're unwilling to address it. And so we're fantasizing these entities as being better than they are, because we want to believe the best of people, because we want people to believe the best of us. And so when they tell us something and they don't fulfill the promise, this is an old trauma wound for humanity. They overpromise, they underdeliver, maybe even lie deliberately to your face, and you just want to think the best of them, because if it were you, you'd want people to give you the benefit of the doubt. That's a projection. So you're playing out this old fantasy, holding out, hoping they're going to do the right thing. And how many times does it take for you to, how many licks till you get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? You are harming yourself by not accepting and acknowledging what they're telling and showing you. You break your own heart when you think they will or want to believe something that they are demonstrating they're incapable of doing. And some people are so sick, you have to let them go. You just have to stop engaging and enabling them. The longer you stick it out, they'll stick it to you. I've experienced that. It really sucks. It's like the boiling frog thing. You know, you've heard the story of the boiling frog. You know, there's a bunch of frogs in a pot. And how do you kill them? Slow boil. They won't even realize they're being cooked. But if one tries to get out, they all drag it back down. And this is the most messed up game. So instead of allowing the one frog to be the leader and them all use each other to get out of the pot, they would rather have them suck it down and suffer together. That's kind of screwed up. You don't want to see someone else happy and successful. You want them in your, misery loves company. That's essentially what that story's about. Instead of recognizing that we're stronger together, they got us fighting amongst ourselves. Yeah. So there's more of a combative and competitive nature that's unnatural to our nature and behavior as a result of the way we've been programmed and conditioned to go along. It's in that way that people interact because they're afraid of not having enough, as if there's not enough to go around. And someone's going to take what they have. Like, this is a big one right here. So this is part of that distrust among us that they have infiltrated. And it's the biggest lie. It's this acting out of fear of security, Yeah. And so we're struggling because we've bought into a lie that's not aligned. The idea that we wouldn't have enough. The world, the energy, everything is infinite. We're just in a concentrated place with a whole lot of energy around us. And then we've got these influences and all these, all the stimulation. I was saying the other day, isn't it ironic? What people don't recognize is when they are frustrated, they are angry, when they're heightened in their emotions, they typically will reach for a stimulant. That's an addictive habit, a pattern. And what does that do? Or you could reach for a depressant, let's say coffee or wine or alcohol. And what you do is you enhance whatever that is. When you're in a mood and you reach for some form of liquid or food, it will reinforce that mood. It will enhance it, typically. So if you go for the stimulant and you're already stimulated, it just makes you more stimulated, makes you more angry, makes you more agitated, frustrated, ready to act out. It gives you a little bit more fire into your fire. Whereas also the depressant, you go and you get, my girlfriend and I were talking, I don't drink. You know why? Because I've done some stupid things. And usually I always regretted the way I felt afterward. And what does the depressant alcohol do? Oh, liquid courage. I wouldn't dance if it wasn't for that. The behaviors that we blame on these things are not these things. It's us hiding behind them, trying to numb out from what we're sensing and feeling. Instead of being authentic in our true nature, we utilize the crutch of a substance to depend on that, and also use it as a codependent blame. So you can't blame and shame me. It was the alcohol in me. But that goes back to the sickness of allowing in the energy and the entities of spirits, alcohol spirits. You literally invite spirits into you, and they're waiting in the wings going, ooh, we're going to have fun tonight, right? Witching hour and all that. The worst things always happen when people are drinking. All right. So these systems that we have in place, they're insisting that we identify ourselves. But that was infiltrated, and it was through the suggestion. And I said this in my last video that essentially, okay, what did I write? You've adopted your identity based on, influenced by, through the repetitive and suggestive statistical census demographic questionnaires, surveys, and applications. When you are on repeat in habitual routine, oh, you've got to fill out this information. When did we start allowing that to dictate our ability to be hired? Or see, again, this is going back to proving your worthiness, proving that you're a human but you're not really proving that you're human. You're just saying, I'm a fictional character on your piece of paper, and you can do with me what you please. You know, put it down on my. Remember when you were in school and you used to get a progress report or your grades? That's essentially what they're doing. They're being a good little doobie because they showed their ID card, and so this will show up favorably. It's no different than this credit system thing they want to implement. These have just been slow rollouts the whole time. And it started with the identification system. It's not a stamp on you. Yeah. But when you lose your legal name, you end the game. Exactly. And so through this continuous asking of questions, they have conditioned you to identify with these things: your color, your race, your sex, your gender, your occupation, your nationality, your background. Like, you're giving up your firstborn. You're basically giving them everything and anything they ask you for, never questioning why. Why do you think they're worthy of hearing and having your information? They're not giving you anything in return. Although they're promising all sorts of accolades and all sorts of special sparkly prizes that 9 times out of 10, they do not deliver. So the id is your basic needs, and it's your programmed desires at the same time, because they know to get you at those young formative years, they can form you in their image. And media is the social conditioning, because mediums channel information. They cast a spell upon you. So all of this is how we have been infiltrated and influenced, fed with the what do they say, the fire hose of information, overwhelm, overstimulation. Like, we don't need this many words. We don't need contracts that are this thick. They've set that up so that we don't have time to go through it, to know what it means. Contracts should be very short, very simple, and you should be able to go mano a mano, people to people. But when you've got this intermediary, this fictional character acting, and see, the thing is you can't even hold the fictional character accountable, and they know that, because it's not a living, human, breathing being. It is not human. It's just a piece of paper. And this is what they don't want you to know, is how easy it would be for the house of cards to fall, baby. Because cards are made of paper too, right? Think about it. You start looking over your life, and you'll start to see patterns, things that maybe you didn't question before, but you're starting to question now. And a lot of people are woken up to this, awake to the fact that they have been held under a spell. What is it going to take for us to stand up and to recognize our personal power and our ability? We shall overcome, that kind of thing. Because also, one of the things that I came across when I was going through my paperwork and I was just doing my research, and I was like, oh, there's some good stuff here. Anytime you have to ask for permission to do something, just proves you're not free. You don't need to pay or have permission to live your life on this planet, this whatever it is, wherever we are. If it's hologram, simulation, it's a firmament or flat or round, whatever the hell it is, doesn't even matter at the end. Although maybe we are being held in a little bubble where there's more out there, and we're being like captive here. I don't believe we're in a slave situation. I mean, this is an enslavement of humanity. I do believe that. But we still have free will, and we still have the ability to choose better and do better. But it's up to us to make that choice. It's up to us to also unite and recognize, I am you and you are me. Meaning we both want our individuality, our ability to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, because that's our God-given right. They're trying to completely axe the fact that there really is a higher being, or that we have any power to begin with. So the id is the ID is your id. Think about it that way, because it's really That is your basic primal pleasure-seeking principle, the id. And you will be programmed from, well, we already have been programmed from the time you're born, because you're born with that natural instinct. The needs, the wants, the wishes, desires, the things that really lie below the surface of why we end up in addiction is because when those needs are not met, we find ways to cope. That's how we develop coping mechanisms and survival tactics. Oh, thank you so much that way. I appreciate that. These survival tactics that we create are to get our needs met. We learn how to manipulate based on the way that we are responded to as children. You know, some children, they throw a temper tantrum and they get their way. And because that becomes a pattern, they become adults who throw temper tantrums, still trying to get their needs met. And the crazy part is it wasn't what they were throwing the temper tantrum about that they needed that need met. It's just they simply wanted attention in a different way. And because they kept getting attention this other way, which is not healthy, they don't even know what the healthy version of that is. It's a total like unveiling. You have to deconstruct to reconstruct and understand or understand where that comes from. When you think a child is just throwing a temper tantrum because they didn't get a toy or something they wanted, it's never about the object. It's about the sense of connection they're missing and lacking from their parent. I don't even have children. I just remember that from my childhood. That when you feel neglected by the parent, your only way to get attention may be to throw a temper tantrum over something else. And if that works, you'll keep doing it because that's the only way you get the feeding of their attention in return. And that's just one example. But the behaviors that we adopt to get our needs met carry into our adulthood. And they don't always serve us so well. In fact, sometimes they become part of the chaos that leads into the addictions and the bad behaviors that we self-perpetuate, and then we create our own struggles and sufferings because we want this, and damn it, why isn't anybody giving it to me? And you need to show up to me the way I need you to show up to me, rather than going within. If you go within, you won't go without. Exactly. It's a healthy attachment too. And especially in abusive family homes or homes that don't have the full family unit in a very strong bond, it's like we will seek out something to fill the void of what was not filled then. So again, I go back to, okay, this is some pretty cool stuff that when you start to remember. So the id is the most basic primal part of the personality present from birth. It operates on the pleasure principle, seeking immediate gratification for our wants and needs. The id is entirely unconscious and contains our most fundamental desires and drives, such as those related to hunger, sex, and aggression. It doesn't consider reality or social appropriateness, and only focuses on personal satisfaction and gratification. The ego is supposed to be the mediating in the conscious, preconscious, and unconscious, because it depends on how aware you are of yourself to recognize this stuff. And this is all based on Freud's work. So, you know, he wasn't the worst psychiatrist, although he had his reputation, as they all did. But he also said that the ego develops from the id during infancy, and its role is to mediate between the demands of the id, reality, and the superego. The ego operates according to the reality principle, meaning what is right here now in the present. It will work both consciously and unconsciously and serves to rationalize the id's demands and navigate the external world's expectations. The superego emerges around the age of 5 and embodies societal rules and moral standards learned from parents and other significant figures. It works to control the id's impulses that are deemed socially unacceptable and strives for perfection, operating on the morality principle. The superego is present in all 3 levels of consciousness: the conscious, the preconscious, and the unconscious. So often, especially in these spiritual circles, and when you're doing this healing work, it's actually just wholeness. We're trying to become whole again. I'm just being silly about this, but there are so many key trigger words and like trendy words that are used out there, like the healing journey. And the reality is you're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. You just need to reclaim your parts and become whole and stop suppressing, learn to express, and allow yourself to address. That is the healthy form of becoming whole again. And sometimes it's like coming through the mud. You know, the lotus blooms out of the mud, just like the butterfly becomes ooey gooey before it emerges from the chrysalis with its wings, a little bit wonky. It's got to build up the strength. And it's with practice, we make progress, not perfectionism. I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I can say that. But it is that primitive, basic, and fully unconscious part of our personality. It contains all of our unconscious energy that is directed towards fulfilling a person's most basic needs. The ego, on the other hand, is the conscious, realistic part of the personality. You know, isn't that interesting? Because as I was saying, in these different circles, when we start talking about shadow work and, you know, doing the work and the dark night of the soul and, you know, healing, wholeness, whatever you're calling it, it's all the same. You're just trying to know thyself and like peel away the layers to your fullness, your wholeness. That the ego is not a bad thing. That you need to be able to be the master of your mind and not the slave to it. The ego is there to serve you. But most people have been taught and told, no, you need to destroy and kill your ego. And it's like, no, you don't. You need it. You do need it. Stop buying into all this BS. There's some crazy talk out there, and that's part of it. According to Freud, the id is present at birth and is the repository. This is a good one. The repository of all the energy needed to run the mind, including the basic urges for food, water, elimination, warmth, affection, and sex. Another definition, according to Freud, was that the id is the source of all psychic energy, making it the primary component of personality. The id is the only component of personality that is present from birth. This aspect of personality is entirely unconscious and includes instinctive and primitive behaviors, as said before. So it's quite intriguing to me, because then I started realizing, wow, if the id is your psychic energy and the repository of all your energy needed to run the mind, and they know this, I'm saying they in the entities on paper, right? They knew this because they basically use psychology to influence us. What do you think marketing is? The media companies are owned by all these whatevers. But they know how to program you. They know that the id is influential during those formative years. That's how they do mind control, brainwashing, subliminal programming, messaging. Like, you hear something on repeat. You hear it enough times, you start to repeat it yourself. And then you start to repeat it yourself, and then you start thinking it's your truth or your facts or your life. You watch enough of some of these series, these TV movies and stuff. Like, a lot of people like to watch certain series and they get really wrapped up in the characters, the actors that are playing the roles. And you will hear people talk about them like they're friends, or like, did you see, oh gosh, Felicia and Jack are back together again on, what was that, Days of Our Lives, or one of those, General Hospital, this was that one. But you know what I mean? It's like, you know more about TV shows than you do about your own self. And then you start identifying. You see how people program, don't even realize they're being programmed? They're taking in information about other people's fake lives, fake scenes, false idols. This is exactly what I'm talking about. People are watching the show and taking it on like it's real. They're feeding themselves the false lie, literally taking in the lies and then regurgitating them as if they're real. Hello? Is anybody home in there? I'm sorry, that's cray-cray. It's like following reality TV, which we all know is scripted, or sports, it's all scripted. And people will continue to follow the lie because it makes them feel better about their own lives. For whatever reason, everybody's got their excuses and You know, there's a reason for every season of your life. You can justify, validate, enable yourself, and whatever explanation, everyone's got a story, you know? And why people relate to certain people, they think there's various psychologies around this when people are watching these kinds of shows, is maybe it makes you feel better about your life because it's not so bad and you don't have to deal with that drama. But you're bringing that drama into your life because you're talking about it. You're feeding it your energy. Yeah, it takes you off track, distract. So by doing that, you're reducing your life to playing the extra in theirs. You see how that works? Like, you need to be the star of your show. You need to dictate your life the way your soul came here to experience this life. You have gifts. You're here to serve. I even speak about it because I feel like I'm withholding mine, where I know I'm meant to do more. And then I do feel a little bit challenged lately because I haven't been getting the right people to engage. But I'm also having to re-navigate waters around who can promise and deliver versus the overpromise and the disappear, underdeliver. So when we are seeing these things on the world stage, we have to catch ourselves and see, why am I contributing? Why am I supporting this? You know, even what's going on right now, how people will get behind somebody they have never met, that they want to connect with and be associated with, because in some unconscious way, they think that'll elevate them as if they are them. That's why people follow people. They have all these followers. Psychologically, people follow big numbers too of followers because somebody's following them. Well, they must be doing something right, and I need to be in their energy because in some way, maybe it'll make me more important, or maybe I can be in that space. Like, there's such a crazy psychology behind why people follow the people they do. There's also the opposite, where they will follow people they can't stand because they get off on being aggravated. That's an addiction too. Trolls that like to look and seek out arguments and cause chaos, because again, that's a part of their trauma. You know, they get off on it because they haven't healed it. They don't even realize it, but they get off on it. That's my point. My point is that's the id. The id is like, it's a little bit of a saboteur if you don't get your shit together. And that's where they prey upon and play upon us, because they can program that into us. That the more you are fed information suggestively, whether it's through you filling out an application that the very first time you did it, you were like, well, what does this mean? What am I supposed to put here? People told you what you should put there and you just went around. Okay. And then next time you did it, you're like, okay, well, I was told I have to put this for myself because this is what they said I identify as. And then you just started repeating it and thinking it was your truth, and it's not. So when we're identifying with celebrities or somebody on the world stage, it's the same thing. It's like, I want to be there. I want to be them. So you feel like if you hold on to their coattails as if, but these people aren't even in your life. They don't give a shit about you. They're not serving you. They're not your best friend. You don't even know if the person's real or if they're just acting on a stage, because the majority of them are. If all the world's a stage, don't you feel like a clown following it? It's not real and it doesn't affect your life. Now, there will be a lot of people who will say, but that does affect my life because of this, and you'll always come up with something. If you want to defend the lie, continue it, you'll find ways to. But that's exhausting because you recognize, well, you might recognize, you might not. If you are fighting to defend your belief systems, and not questioning if they're even, you don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to prove yourself. But that's where people get tripped up. When you catch yourself in defense or on the offense, there may be something to it you need to address. Because if it triggered you, there's some work to do. So, continuing on. Like, I just found this really interesting because this is how the game is rigged. This is how the life game is rigged. It is literally a paper trail game. Everything that we're playing with right now, even the paper, is money. Like when you have it in physical form, otherwise it's digital, and then it's like, it's in the air. It doesn't exist. It's crazy when you stop and really reflect upon it. So there are people, and I keep saying this, but I hadn't finished it, where you go into a government building and the person, or you go to court and it says this entity versus your fictional, lost at sea legal name. It's not you. It's just what has been identified on paper that you have identified with, because they're telling you that's who you are. So you're just basically, it's like you're pledging allegiance to what they have marked you with. So if you want to talk about the mark of the beast, it is the identity they have given you, or the social security number would be good too, because it's like, it's a serial number. It's a tracking device. So the real mark of the beast is that you're tracked and traced by the ID, by the id, by the way that they deemed you, and you adopted it and you accepted it. Each and every one of us. Yeah. It's not to be used in commerce. Exactly. In fact, it's the whole thing going back to taxation is theft. People are voluntarily paying taxes on their equal exchange of service. You work for a set amount, you're giving your time, your energy, your blood, sweat, tears, and you're not making a profit. It's an equal exchange for work. But that's where people get tripped up because of the definition of the word profit. False prophets profit from us. See what I mean by the languaging? How they really get you? You don't even realize that when they're saying the word profit, they're getting you to profitize. They're profitizing. They're profiting off of you. It's freaking. It's like it's a total Jedi mind trick. It's a mind fuck. So you're like going, are you kidding me? Whoa. I mean, because my mother was big on language, and I just, to this day, I wish she were still alive just so I could have the conversation around, Mom, like you taught me some really cool stuff about words and language, but look at where we're at. And then like her and I'd be, I just totally imagine the conversation. So fictional characters, how freaking bizarre is this? That it's almost like playing Monopoly. Well, it is playing a Monopoly actually, because we're literally playing a board game with these characters, with these pieces of paper, slices of the tree of life. They're cutting down the tree of life and taking away ours. That tree of life is also our life. And so when they cut that tree down to put us on paper, it's like cutting off our life support and our life. And I'm saying that metaphorically because trees give off oxygen for us to breathe. And without the trees, we have no life. And so cutting down the trees and turning it into pieces of paper in this game of life, this game on paper life, this isn't a real life. This is a game. But they've used us through this instrument against one another. So cutting down that tree of life to create paper forms of our lives is what cuts off our lifeline. And that's why it's not aligned. And that's why so many people are like freaking out, like, what the hell is going on? And you're feeling it and you're sensing it around you and everything. And people are like super on edge because because we're being told all these stories around, wait for this date. And there's like all of this prophecy. And oh, I want to see the Phoenician starter kit. I'm definitely going to check that out. But what's going on around us is like the sitting on the edge of your seat and waiting to see what's going to happen. On the 23rd, something was going to happen. And then something's going to happen this week. And then on the 4th of October, it's like, they're going to do a nationwide emergency thing. And everybody's like, turn your phones and everything off because they're going to send out a signal and it's going to fuck up people and blah, blah, blah. Listen, if we keep living in fear, we're never going to get out of here. Sure, that is very possible. These things can happen. But the ice caps were supposed to be melted by now. The oil reserves were supposed to be run out. Nuclear, blah, 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 blah. They're so good at predicting, aren't they? They've been wrong every time. And people are still sitting at the edge of their seats waiting for what they tell you as the story narrative to unfold and happen. Why? Because they know how easy it is to manipulate you, how easy it is to influence you, because you've gotten influence this whole time. The idea that you are still sitting on the edge of your seat and not living your life shows how easy it is to hold you back, to suppress your power, and you did it voluntarily because you bought into their story. It's all a story. Do you know what that means? It's not real. You're not physically in most of these places that they report on. You don't know if it's true. Do you know someone in country? Like whenever you watch the Northeast, West, South, the news, the question should always be, how does this affect me? Not, the world is falling, the sky is falling, henny penny kind of deal. It's like, you really need to evaluate. Are you living your fullest life? Or are you in fear of something that is actually inhibiting you from moving forward? And I can attest to the fact that I have done that in my life. If I didn't know it, it wouldn't be a part of me. And so I spot it because I got it. Most of the patterns I see is because I've experienced it. It's because I own it and I know it about myself. You can see through someone's BS when you accept your own. When you see and know your own patterns, it's easy to recognize the patterns around you. So fictional characters, it's not the ego that they're siphoning off of, it is the id. But the fictional characters on the world stage have programmed, indoctrinated, and influenced people to comply with their fake system. They need us to play this paper game because they're not real. So they've got us voluntarily trading in our humanity for their insanity. They're not real. It's the boogeyman. It's the same thing with the past 3 years talking about this boogeyman. They need you to believe it to comply. And the funny thing is, again, it's power suggestion. When you were a kid, keep crying. You're going to make yourself sick. You're the manifester. They're just planting seeds and seeing what sticks and what grows in you. They're literally telling you a story and you are adopting it and integrating it as your own. You're believing it because if you hear it enough times, it will become your reality. Even if it's the news in the background, I like to have something in the background playing. That one blows my mind all the time. You need to be selective about what you expose yourself to, whether you're listening to it, watching it, you're exposed to it. You need to be accountable to your energy and treat yourself as sacred. Don't allow just anything to infiltrate you. Yes. When we feel anger, we feel powerless. I'm sorry, that was wrong. When we feel anger, we feel powerful, right? Like it's like, I'm ready to take something out. But a lot of times that's when you're the most powerless too, by the way. Because you will typically, when you're angry, that's an emotional space. That is an emotional place where you will make an irrational choice. Whenever we're emotional, we become irrational. We usually regret what we do. We're not in the right state of mind. We're not in our bodies. We've been hijacked into some trauma because the anger is triggered by a past injustice or trauma, something you've experienced that is unhealed. So we will react and act from that trauma, not from the moment, not in the right state of mind. We will react and act from that reverted state, from that place when we were younger. When we feel grief, we feel powerless. But believe it or not, with grief, it's an acknowledgement of a loss. And sometimes grief is also right underneath the surface of anger. So the two go hand in hand. Even though one may feel more powerful than the other, they're handshaking 9 times out of 10 because the grief is always underneath the anger. And anger shows you care. You get angry. Great example. You lose someone you love. Yeah, there's grief under that anger because you're pissed because you love them so much and they're gone. But the grief is under that, and it always is. And this actually, so yesterday I had to take a day. I have my beach days now. Lately I've been really needing the beach. See, there was a seagull. There was a group of a few seagulls that came over to me. And typically I talk to the animals. I talk to the birds. I'm that person. And the seagulls will always come over by me. I'm like, I look at them and I'm like, listen, you know what? You need to go away. I don't have any food for you. Don't be begging over at me. Because I don't bring food to the beach. And then they all kind of left but one. And this particular one just did this thing with its wings. And I was like, oh, look at you. What beautiful wings. What a beautiful span. I saw you. I see you. Like giving them an acknowledgement. I don't know if they're male or female. I'm not that bird person that can tell. I don't know what the things are. So anyway, I'm standing there. And then at a certain point, we had eye contact. We had a moment. And I'm like, okay, I see you. You've got something to share with me. And as soon as I recognized what it was fundamentally powerful because I shared this with my friends today. I looked down because I caught the fullness of the body. But at a moment I looked down and I was like, something's off about the legs. And it turned out it was standing on one leg. And the other leg wasn't all there. It was clipped off at something. I don't know what happened to it. I almost feel like I've met this seagull before. I feel like this is the second time I've seen the same seagull or another one like it. But it only had one leg, essentially. It was cut off on the other leg. So it was standing on one leg. And what this symbolized to me in these times that we're living in, and it's a deep message, that this particular seagull was standing on one leg but didn't appear to be out of balance. The seagull looked normal, like a regular seagull. Looked perfectly fine until I noticed. And I went, wow. What appears, above, what you see on the surface, does not represent the person or the animal, the foundation, the grounding of that individual and what they're going through. So that we, most humans, will not necessarily be showing all our shit outwardly. Like we may appear to have it all together, but you don't know what somebody's gone through to get to where they're at. You don't know that they're standing on one leg and maintaining balance in a way that you're not even noticing that because you're just seeing here. So just never think that you know everything about what you're seeing in every situation around you. Whether on the world stage, assuming you want to believe the best of celebrities, come on, they're actors. I believe all these people are actually just all actors and they're all expendable. So they're being used. They're on the world stage, they're playing their roles and the parts, and they're doing it really well. Because back in the times of the empire, the Roman Empire, that's what the gladiator games were all about. Keep the people fat, dumb, and happy. Basically, feed them, get them drunk up, give them some sexual acts, give them some gladiator fights. They'll be happy. They won't notice half the stuff that's going on around them. Just keep them satiated enough to keep them weak and subservient and submissive to the powers that want to rule over them. Because the people tend to forget that they're outnumbering those few people that they think are ruling. So it's really about recognizing the numbers, not your own insecurities. It's about the bonding and the unity of people, and humanity needs to come back together. Yeah, so people may appear to be doing well, but we don't see what they're standing on or how they're keeping it together, is essentially what that message was telling me. And your body is your instrument. It's always going to tell you, it will guide you. It's your GPS temple. I mean, your body is going to tell you when something's out. It's the tattletale on the mind. If there's a dis-ease and a misalignment, something ain't feeling right, tap into whatever it is you're so dogmatic about. What are you unable to let go of? Because tension is usually the inability to let go of something. Like you're holding on for dear life. You're just like, eh. And I know for myself, one of my big ways of telling is I've been I had my wisdom tooth taken out by the military, and it messed up my jaw. And when I clench my jaw at night, or when I get tensed up, it causes tension in my neck, and it travels into my shoulders, goes down my back. And because this is part of the vestibular system, it highly affects our pelvic floor, our pelvic area. Our hips is where we hold our emotions. Everything travels down. It also travels from the bottom up too. But if we don't have a solid foundation and everything in alignment, it's going to be easy to trip us up. And the body will always tell you. It'll always tattletale on the mind. It will always give you the clues. It will signal to you through your own body's language. There's wisdom there. But that's where you need to also align to your body language to really recognize it's a mind, body, spirit, soul connection. It's a trinity. You know, what makes up the soul? It's the whole. It's not, you can't just sever it. It's always a part of it. So if we could just recognize this is a paper game, everybody burn their pieces of paper, maybe we need to do that. I wonder if sometimes, you know, because I love books, and there's two interpretations I could have about the book burnings. One could be because it was all a lie, people realized they got rid of the books because it was a form of track and trace. Maybe those books that they were burning were really the books holding all the information that they were tracking and tracing. That's one interpretation, because we live in duality and everything has duplicity to it. So there's two stories to make up the whole story, right? There's two sides of the story. You have to hear both sides. My intuitive hit says they were the books that were tracking and tracing us, just like they are now. And then there were the books of history, real truth. And so at one point, we burned the books that they were holding our information on, just like technology. You know, the data can always be destroyed. But we're afraid of that too. Isn't that funny? But they're harvesting it and they're holding it against us, because that's what that's always about. It's always to have something to hold over you. But in reality, they're under us. That's what's the flipping of this weird scales. I mean, we're in Libra season too, by the way. Okay, I got 20% battery. We're in Libra season, which is about balancing the scales of justice. And I feel personally, I'm a Libra rising, so I'm always about seeking the balance, about the justice. What's the worst that could happen? Okay, you get hacked. I mean, if it really boiled down to it, like they keep throwing out these cyber attacks. It's like they're telling you, basically they are, we're going to have an attack. Oh, so you're going to attack us and say it's some other terrorist organization because that's what they do. Got to have a bad guy to go after to seem relevant, like Big Daddy's got your back. See how that works? It's so fucked up. I mean, I was in the military. I'm over here going, what the hell are we doing? We're not, when you go and you think you're serving in a certain capacity and then you learn that it's all a lie, it's okay. Yeah. It is a paper game. It's all a game. And when we wake up to that and we start again, back to the book burning, like that just dropped in. I'm going to tell you, I really believe that's what happened, because they they can't track and trace us in such large numbers that we are, right? So they want to depopulate us so that they can have an easier, more manageable group of people to enslave. They only need a certain amount, and then they want the whole robotic AI to be able to do a lot of the work. I can see goods and bads and everything. But the book burning of our data was one side of the story. The other side was the original history that was burnt up. So both sides have played a role in the book burnings, if you really think about it. I never considered that until just now when that dropped in. Yeah, the mill. Ooh. So, at what point did we agree to be reduced to fictional characters on paper and having to give proof of identity to a fictional entity? Imagine all the people who have gone along, agreed upon with blind faith. We did this to ourselves. And I don't know how it got tripped up, because that information is withheld from us. We don't know the real truth. But I do know the tentacles, the Hydra, is so interwoven that people don't even realize, when you get a certain type of job and you're like, oh, I'm making all this money, so like I'd hate to lose my cash cow. I'm making millions, and I'm in this certain club, and I'm at this certain level, and they're still so low on the totem pole that they're expendable. And so it's like, there has to be a point where you wake up and go, I feel unfulfilled. My life does not actually feel like I'm serving. And I do believe there are a lot of great people across all walks of life. I have no like us versus them ideas in all this. I really do believe that, everybody is playing their role. Even these dark entities, as we want to call them, these creatures from the Black Lagoon, the fictional characters that hide, the actual identity of what is really behind the scenes. They don't want us to know, but we got a pretty good clue. The ones you can't talk about or speak up on, you can't call them out for their corruption. Yeah, that's pretty obvious. I don't need to even say it. So like when you go to give your ID card, it's really kind of crazy. It's like that person behind the desk, as James was telling me, he turned around and he confronted them and said, what do you want an ID from me for? I'm a living, breathing human. What, you don't believe me? They're like, I don't need to give an ID. I says, but who's asking for the ID? This entity that doesn't exist. The person behind the desk is just acting on their behalf, which is interesting because they don't ever question the fact they're working for a non-human. It's almost like you could say AI. May not have thought of it that way, but it might just be. If this is a simulation, the fake paperwork and all that gobbledygook could just be part of the program. Pretty interesting stuff. But can you understand, can you recognize how you have been trained to adopt your identity just based on everything I just talked about? Like that's like blow your mind stuff. Like, I am not a piece of paper. I am a living, breathing human right in front of your face. I don't have to identify myself as anything if I don't want to, which is funny how, and I want to point this out, what we've been seeing around the world stage about identity. You see how they're fucking people up? People don't even know who they are, don't know how to identify themselves. They're making shit up. That's part of the game. If you're so confused about who you are, you can be told what you are. You're easier to manage and manipulate, influence. The sooner you recognize and own your sovereignty, you're human, you're breathing, living human, reclaim your securities. Nobody has any authority over you but you. But I go back to, in order to do that, requires you to also be personally accountable and responsible to you, to reclaim all of your parts, to not dismiss. There are no missed chances. Don't diss yourself. The recognizing that you are a powerful being. You are a master manifester. You are here for a purpose. Let no man put us under. Hello. We're here for more. We're supposed to be here for one another. We need to stop allowing these creatures to point a finger at us as if we're the problem because they got 3 back at them. Who knows? Maybe they got more than 3 for all I know. But you know what I'm saying? They've got the loaded gun, and that shit's going to ricochet back at them because that's how it works. Truth always works itself out, and it always comes out in the end. And you know what? It's not over till the happy part. We're not there yet. So just remember, you've just been repetitive. You've had repetitive, over and over again, suggestible things grilled into you, you've done, just like when you went to school and you had to write things over and over again to get it. Repeat after me. Memorize this. Bunch of junk you didn't even think you needed or even realized existed. What just happened? Oh, that was weird. Anyway, so the last little bit I actually put in the description, but there are fictional institutions and entities on this world stage that have programmed, indoctrinated, and they influence people to comply to their fake system. We are all guilty of this. We do definitely have to hold them accountable. We have been entranced, literally in a trance, cast under a spell, and everybody's been waking up to this slowly. The drips, the information, all the truth is in front of us. It's just a matter of us coming together. And what I like to say is that we are all energy. We are all frequency. The frequent keys are to unlock each other's ciphers, to put the keys to remember, to put us back together as a whole. Not everybody's going to go along for there's going to be a split. There's already a divide, but there's a lot more of us that are awake than they would care for us to know. But to top it off, by confusion, by overstimulation and overwhelm of information, they've been able to convince people. This has been such a clever scheme, Ponzi scheme, pawns in the game. Can't make this shit up. They've convinced us to do their dirty work. Like I said before, James says it. It's like the hidden hand doesn't like to get its own hand dirty. So they influence us. We decide to buy into their narrative, to their story, which is all made up. Just keep in mind, everything's a story. Everything's a freaking story. And it's up to you to call the bluff. It's up to all of us to call their bluff. Because they've got us policing one another, literally keeping each other in line, which is out of alignment with yourself and your heart and soul. And it's out of this space of survival. It's this, it's no different during the wars back in the day when it was like when I go to Germany, I have to say, like years ago, I just found it so sad that people would hold each other in this, like, you need to follow the rules. And in the pointing and the finger and the you need to was basically saying, I have to follow the rules. You're not going to get me in trouble. And so therefore, I want you to do what I have to do because I can't get out of it. Instead of seeing that you both could live your lives happily without, trying to impose or dictate what the other one's doing. Because again, nobody's supposed to rule over you. Definitely not your neighbor. Definitely not your fellow, your government. This is not what we signed up for. So the fact that they're able to get people to police one another, that's when they know they're winning in some respect. But it's fake proof of our living. It's freaking insane. It's to provide that piece of paper. That's not who we are. Like, that's the big one right there. That's the biggest mind fuck. Exactly. They're at it again. And people are still falling for the hook, line, and sinker because they're still caught in the trauma of, but we want to believe them. They'd never do that to us. They wouldn't lie to us. Look, they're saying they care. Not actually noticing their audio and video are totally out of sync, that they're not walking their talk. Where is everyone? Exactly. Where are all these fake entities? Because I'm not that piece of paper. But we never question, okay? So policing one another to provide fake proof over our living being, but never questioning the fictional institution that cannot manifest or materialize in physical form. They've literally pitted us against one another. That's the bottom line. And that's how they win, is when you and I are fighting over stupid shit on the world stage, because all of that's fictional. All of the world is a stage. Wants to keep you in a trance so you don't take a stance for yourself. You know what? People see what they want to see. Just have to remember that. People will only attract where they're at. They will only allow and accept what they want to. Like I was saying about belief systems, it's unfortunate, but the belief systems tend to create a groove. You know, I've talked about this before, just like a record. There's all these grooves and patterns, and we all have our behaviors and our routines. The longer you do something, the longer you believe something, the deeper the groove it makes in you. In order to retrain and repattern yourself, you have to start doing different things. You have to literally confront what it is. First off, you have to identify it. Then you have to confront it. Then you have to start unraveling it, decoding it, deconstructing it, and then you have to replace it with something that is empowering, because that disempowerment from the belief system that created the groove needs to be filled up with something that will elevate you and empower you. It's the reprogramming, it's the unlearning, and then the retraining and training yourself from the inside, the understanding of yourself. And it typically takes about 40 days to, set a new habit, routine, pattern, because all of it's addiction. All of it's addiction. To defend a lie all your life and then find out it's an untruth, you're going to get angry. So people have to go through the grieving process when they recognize they've been lied to, or even if they're willing to accept it, because they can still fight tooth and nail until it no longer can be denied. Again, you suppress it, you ignore it, it's going to express, and then you're going to be left to address it, whether it's in your face or you're willing to actually go to it. Whenever you avoid something, you risk it confronting you. It's better that you confront it than allowing it to come back at you like a ricochet or like the ball under the water. Because typically, the more you push something down, the more resistance and boom, in your face it comes. So you can run, you can hide, but it will always be with you. And it actually is stronger when you're resisting it than if you are just confronting it. Because the resistance creates the attraction that magnetizes and holds it on to you. Yeah. If you avoid it, the universe will make you. You inverse. The universe knows what your frequency is supposed to be at. It knows what your song is, your verse, your music, your frequency, your harmony. And so if you're not aligning to it and attuning to it, you'll be forced to confront whatever it is you avoid. And yeah, we do, don't we? We know it from personal experience. I mean, my body's been my biggest teacher all this time. Whenever my body has broken down, it's because I wasn't willing to confront the breakdown of the dogma, of the non-serving belief system, or whatever it was I was fearing at the time. Usually what you fear, you actually attract and create. The trying to keep my, trying to do my job and not let anybody come at me, but yet that's exactly what ended up happening. So this was a lot of information. I know it was a little deep, but I think this is really, really important for the times we're in right now. I will also link in the comments and in the description my affiliate link for the Freedom People if you're interested. I'm in the process of getting my documentation out of the system because it's really important. You can get all of your, you'd be surprised. I still am learning. I don't have all the answers, but exiting the system is the first part. I'm not the paper or the name thereon. Exactly. That's what's important, is that we reclaim our human, our true sovereignty, our true God-given rights, which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There's nothing in there that says you got to pay on this planet to live, that you have to prove your identity to man or to an entity that doesn't exist. All of that is man-made. The sooner we confront that, the sooner the house of cards will fall. Yeah, exactly. And so I bid you adieu and wish you well. And I will have that link in the comments in the description if it's interest of yours. I also am working on my offer soon. I have something special just to put out there. Yeah, I'm very grateful that you tuned in. Thank you very much for liking, for sharing, subscribing. Remember to click the, sharing is caring. Give me a like. Smash the notifications bell too so you get all my content and all that. Lots of love. Mwah, 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 mwah. Sweet dreams.